All the years Pearl had owned this watch, he'd never mentioned one. Yes, a very elaborate one. It's almost impossible to see unless you know where to look. And inside, I found a photograph of a young woman and a small key. I felt room around me begin to spin. A picture of a woman, the key. What did it all mean? Are you sure it was Pearl's watch? I asked, even though I already knew the answer. Absolutely. I remember that watch very well. Pearl had shown it to me several times, though he had never let me hold it in my hands. It's unique, engraved on the inside of the cover. The initials, PW, and the date, the year 1988. That was the year of our silver wedding. Pearl bought the watch at an auction in Geneva, where we went to celebrate our anniversary. What are you going to do, Liam? I asked. Have you contacted Bentley? Yet? No, not yet. I thought I'd talk to you first. That watch, it belongs to you, doesn't it? Yes, I answered firmly. Bentley and Marilyn took it without my permission. Liam sighed. I could hear him going through something on his desk. That's what I thought. Bentley was too persistent. Said you gave him the watch after Pearl died, but something about his behavior struck me as odd. I never gave him that watch. I said he stole it from my house. Adelaide, can you come to the store? I think you should see what I found and get the watch. Of course, I agreed to come over in an hour. Hanging up their phone, I sat still for a while trying to make sense of what I'd heard. The secret compartment, a photograph of an unknown woman, a key. What did it all mean? And why had Pearl never told me about it? I gathered myself quickly and hailed a cab. On the way to Liam's store, my thoughts swirled in my head like bees in a hive. Who could the woman in the picture be? Why had Pearl kept her image in the secret compartment of his favorite watch? And what did the little key open? Liam's store was in the old part of town in a building dating back to the turn of the last century. Vintage signage, dark wood framed, windows, a door with a small bell that jingled as you entered. It all created atomic travelling atmosphere. Liam was waiting for me. He was behind the counter talking to a customer, but when saw me, he immediately apologized and came over. Adelaide, thank you for coming on such short notice. Come into my office. He led me through the store to a small room in the back. It was a cozy room with a solid wooden desk, a few chairs, and shelves filled with books and catalogues. Sit down. Please. Liam pointed to a chair opposite the table. Would you like some tea, coffee? No, thank you. I sat down, feeling the tension stiffen. My shoulders. Show me what you found, Liam. He nodded and opened the desk drawer. He pulled out a familiar dark blue velvet case and placed it in front of me, then carefully pulled out a watch. The Vacheron Constantin looked exactly as I remembered it. The gold case finely engraved, the flawless dial, the hands frozen at a 1:45. Your son didn't wind them, Liam remarked. That's good. It's better for old movements like this to run regularly, but not as often as a modern watch. I nodded silently, reaching out for the watch. Liam handed it to me, and I felt a familiar weight in my palm. I opened the lid and looked at the dial, then turned the watch over and saw the engraving Liam had mentioned. PW and the date, the year of our silver wedding. Now look here. Liam took the watch back and carefully opened the back cover, exposing the movement. See this little panel. It looks like it's part of the case, but it's actually... He gently pressed. Something in the panel slid open, revealing a tiny compartment. I leaned closer, holding my breath. Here. Liam pulled a small envelope out of the compartment and placed it on the table. Here's what I found. I opened the envelope with trepidation. Inside was a photograph. A small yellowed photograph. It showed A young woman with dark hair and a serious look in her eyes. She was looking directly into the camera, smiling slightly. I thought there was something vaguely familiar about her features, but I couldn't remember where I'd seen her before. Next to the photo was a tiny Kano bigger than my pinky finger. It was old with an intricate head decorated with some kind of pattern. "Who is this woman?" Liam asked. "I don't know," I answered honestly, staring at their picture. I'd never seen her before. "There's something written on the back," Liam said. I turned the picture over. There was indeed an inscription in small, neat handwriting that I recognized immediately as Perkin 1964. Forgive me. 19,642 years before I met Pearl. Who was this Eleanor? And why did Pearl ask for forgiveness? And what could this key unlock? Liam asked, picking up the small metal object. I have no idea. I shook my head. Pearl had never mentioned the key, or a secret compartment in the clock. Certainly not Eleanor. We were both silent for a while, pondering the situation. "What are you going to do now, Adelaide?" Liam finally asked. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. First, I went to take the watch, the photograph, and the key. They belong to me. Second, I want to find out who Eleanor is and what the note means and what that key opens. What about Bentley and Marilyn? They'll be expecting an answer from me, won't they? I've been thinking, what do I do with my son and daughter-in-law? Confront them directly, call the police, or try to sort things out on our own. Tell them, you need a little more time for the appraisal, that the watch is very rare, and you want to consult an expert from Europe. That will give me time to figure out what it all means. Liam nodded. Good. But they are not likely to wait long. Bentley was very insistent about a quick sale. I understand, but I need at least a few days. Of course, Adelaide. I'll do my best. He carefully packed the watch back into its case and put the photograph and key in a separate envelope. Here, take it and be careful. I thanked Liam in making sure. Everything was securely packed. Put the case and envelope in my bag. One more thing, Adelaide. Liam sighed as I was about to leave. When Bentley brought the watch, he wasn't alone. Marilyn was with him, and she seemed very interested in what might be inside the watch. She asked a lot of questions about the movement, how the watch opened, if there were any secret compartments inside. I froze. Do you think they knew about the secret compartment? I'm not sure, but Marilyn was definitely looking for something. She even offered me extra money if I would thoroughly inspect the mechanism and report any unusual details. That was would. If Bentley and Marilyn just wanted to sell the watch for money, why such interest in the movement? Why offer an extra fee to inspect it? Thanks for the warning, Liam, I said. I'll keep it in mind. Leaving the store, I hailed a cab and gave Doris's address. I needed Simeon to talk to think this through. And Doris was the only person I could trust. Doris, as always, welcomed Ed with open arms. She could see in my face that something was wrong. Adelaide, what's happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Perhaps I have, I replied, walking into her sitting room and sinking into a chair. The ghost of Pearl's past. I told her everything about Liam's call, about the clock, about the stash with the photograph and the key, about the note on the back. Doris listened without interrupting, only occasionally shaking her head or raising her eyebrows. And you have no idea who this Eleanor is? She asked when I was done. I didn't. In all the years of our marriage, Pearl never mentioned any Eleanor. What about his life before you met? Did he ever talk about her? I wondered. Pearl didn't like to talk about his past. I knew only the general facts: where he had been born, where he had studied, where he had worked. But the details, the people, their relationships, all of it was obscured. Not much, I admitted. He always said his real life began when he met me. Doris chuckled. Typical male move. My life began with you, darling. And what came before that you don't want to ask? I took the picture out of the envelope and showed it to Doris. Here it was. Elena. Doris scrutinized the picture. HM. A beautiful girl and young. How old is she here? 22 years old. About that, I agreed. The picture was taken in 1964. 2 years. Before Pearl and I met. How old was he then? 30. 28. I corrected him. He was 4 years older than me. Doris turned the picture over and read the inscription. Forgive me, I wonder what he was apologizing for. I've been thinking about that too, I sighed. And about why he kept that picture all these years, keeping it a secret from me. And what this key opens, Doris added, picking up a small metal object. It looks old. Yes, and very unusual. I've never seen a key like this in our house. Doris examined the key carefully. Do you know what it looks like? It looks like the key to an old safe or a secret box. My grandfather had one with a double bottom and a tricky lock. I wondered, could Pearl have something like that? And if so, where did he keep it? We have to look for it, I said firmly. Something that could be opened with that key. Something that might explain who Eleanor was and why Pearl kept her picture. What about Bentley and Marilyn? Doris asked. Are you going to confront them? Not now, I shook my head. First, I want to find out what it all means and to see if they knew about the stash in the clock. According to Liam, Marilyn had a special interest in the mechanism. You think they were looking for something specific? Maybe. But what? And how could they know about the stash if I didn't even know about it? We discussed these questions for a while longer, but we couldn't find any answers. Finally, I decided it was time to go home and start searching. Be careful, Adelaide. Doris warned me as she walked me to the door. If Bentley and Marilyn are really looking for something, they might not be happy to hear that you were ahead of them. I nodded, realizing she was right. The situation was getting more and more confusing and possibly dangerous. When I got home, the first thing I did was to take the watch, the photograph, and the key into the bedroom and hide them in a new place, an old jewelry box I kept in the far corner of the closet. Then she began a systematic search of the house, beginning with Pearl's study. The study had remained virtually untouched since his death. I couldn't bring myself to sort through his belongings, to throw away the papers, to clear the shelves of the books he had loved so much. Everything was still as it had been when he was alive. The massive oak desk, the leather chair, the racks of books, the paintings on the walls. I methodically explored every desk drawer, every shelf, every inch of space, looking for something that could be opened with Asmore key, but I found nothing. My gaze fell on the painting that hung above the desk, a seascape that Pearl had bought on a trip to Italy. I'd always thought there was nothing behind it, just a wall. But what if? I took the painting down and scrutinized the wall behind it. At first glance, there was nothing unusual. But when I ran my hand over the surface, I felt a slight unevenness. When I looked more closely, I noticed a thin line forming a rectangle about 20 by 30 centimeters. My heart beat faster. I tapped on the wall. The sound was different, more muffled in this place. There was definitely something there. But how to open it? I scrutinized the outline of the rectangle and noticed a tiny hole in one corner. A hole that could have been a keyhole. With trepidation, I pulled out a small key and held it up to the hole. It fit perfectly. I turned the key and a part of the wall that seemed solid moved forward slightly, revealing a small niche. In the niche was an old leather folder tied with ribbon. I carefully pulled it out and placed it on the table. I untied the ribbon and opened the folder. Inside were documents, old letters, photographs, some official papers, and at the top was an envelope marked to Adelaide if anything happens. I recognized Pearl's handwriting. He'd left it for me. But why did he hide it? Why hadn't he told me about the hiding place? About the key? About the folder? With trembling hands, I opened the envelope and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. I unfolded it and began to read. My dear Adelaide, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer by your side, and it means that you have found the key I hid in the watch. I sank into the chair, feeling the ground go from under my feet. Pearl knew this day could come. He had prepared. He'd left me a message from the past. I continued reading, and with each line, the world I knew crumbled and built anew. There are things I never told you. Not because I didn't trust you, but because I wanted to protect you. You and someone else. Now it's time to find out the truth. I turned the page, preparing to learn the secret Perkle had kept all these years. A secret that began with a photograph of a young woman named Eleanor and a note that said, "I'm sorry." When I got home from Liam's jewelry store, I went up to the bedroom and hid the watch in a new place, an old shoe box on the top shelf of the closet. I put the envelope with the photo and the key next to it. I needed time to think it over to gather my thoughts. I went down to the kitchen, put the kettle on. The mechanical actions were soothing. Getting a cup, making tea, adding a spoonful of sugar. Familiar rituals I'd followed for decades, but my thoughts were far from kitchen worries. Who was Eleanor? Why did Pearl keep her picture in the secret compartment of his watch? And what did the inscription "Forgive me" mean? After finishing my tea, I went back to the bedroom and took out the envelope again. I spread the photograph on Thebes and scrutinized it. A young woman with dark hair and serious eyes. Something about her features seemed vaguely familiar, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. Turning the photograph over, I read the inscription again. Elelena, 1964. Forgive me. Paravel's handwriting was firm, confident, without a trace of trepidation or doubt. But there was a heaviness in those simple words. I took the key and examined it carefully. Small, old-fashioned, with an intricate head. What could it open? Some kind of safe? A casket? A vault? And then it hit me. The writing on the back of the photo. What if it's not just a message from the past? What if it was a clue? I dressed quickly and went down to Pearl's office. The room had been virtually untouched since his death. I couldn't bring myself to go through his things, rearrange the furniture, take the paintings off the walls. Everything was same as it had been when he was alive. A massive oak desk, a leather armchair, shelves of books, paintings on the walls. The paintings. I slowly looked around the walls. There were 5 of them. A seascape above the table that we'd bought in Italy. An Art Nouveau abstract. A gift from a colleague. A Monet reproduction. A photograph of New York where we'd spent our honeymoon, and a small portrait of a woman painted by a local artist. My gaze lingered on the last painting. The woman in the portrait was elderly, with grey hair and a wrinkled face, but there was something about her features. Something in the line of her chin, in the shape of her eyes. I stepped closer, gazing into the portrait. Yes, I could see the resemblance now. The woman in the portrait could be an aged version of Eleanor from the photograph. My heart beat faster. I carefully removed the painting from the wall. There was nothing unusual on the back of the frame, just a paper backing securing the canvas. I put the portrait back in place and continued my inspection. Next was a picture of New York City. Taking it down, I noticed it was a little heavier than a normal photo frame should be. Turning it over, I found that the backing looked recently replaced. The edges of the paper were cleaner and newer than the other pictures. Carefully peeling away the backing, I looked inside the frame. It was empty. Just that picture in the glass. I checked the rest of the paintings, but found nothing out of the ordinary. The last was this escape above Pearl's desk. His favorite painting. He often said it reminded him of freedom, of the horizons that always awaited ahead. Removing the painting, I carefully examined the frame, the backing, the canvas itself. Nothing. I was about to hang it back up when my gaze fell on the wall behind the painting. At first glance, it was an ordinary wall painted the same light beige color as the whole office. But when I looked more closely, I noticed a thin line, barely visible in the semi-darkness of the room. The line formed a rectangle about 30 by 40 centimeters. My heart beat even faster. I ran my fingers along the line, feeling the slight bulge. There was a tiny hole in one corner of the rectangle, so small that it was easily mistaken for an ordinary wall irregularity. With trembling hands, I pulled out the key and held it up to the hole. It went in perfectly without the slightest resistance. I turned the key and a part of the wall that had seemed solid came forward slightly. A hiding place. Pearl had hidden it in the wall of his study, and I, having lived with him for almost 50 years, hadn't even realized it. I tugged gently at a protruding part of the wall, and it opened easily, revealing a small niche. Inside was a dark leather folder, tied with a simple ribbon. I took it out and carried it to the table. Sitting down in Pearl's chair, I slowly untied the ribbon and opened the folder. Inside were several documents neatly organized into separate envelopes. The first envelope was signed Will in Pearl's firm, confident handwriting. I opened it and pulled out several sheets stapled together. The first page read Last Will and Testament of P.L. A. James Whitmore. The date was 6 months before his death. But this was odd. Pearl's formal will, read by his lawyer after his funeral, had been dated 2 years earlier. According to it, Pearl's entire estate was divided between me and Bentley, with small amounts for a few charitable organizations. I began to read. I, Perkle James Whitmore, being of sound mind and sound judgment, do hereby revoke all previous wills and dispositions, and declare this to be my last will and testament. A standard beginning, nothing unusual. But beyond that, the text deviated from what I'd heard in the lawyer's office. My estate is to be divided as follows. First, to my wife, Adelaide Ellen Whitmore. I leave our house in Johns Creek with all its contents, all bank accounts registered in my name, and 50% of the stock of Whitmore Analytics. Second, to my daughter Fiona Margaret Chester, I leave 30% of the stock of Whitmore Analytics and the contents of safe deposit box number 112 at the First National Bank of Johns Creek. Third, to my son, Bentley Percival Whitmore, I leave 20% of the stock of Whitmore Analytics and a collection of watches, with the exception of a Vacheron Constantin pocket watch, which is to remain with my wife Adelaide. I reread that paragraph several times, unable to believe my eyes. A daughter? Pearl had a daughter. Fiona Margaret Chester and Bentley was only receiving 20% of the company's stock, not 50% as stated in the official will. No wonder he and Marilyn were so anxious to get her hands on the watch. Perhaps they had somehow learned of the existence of this real will and wanted to destroy the evidence. I continued reading. What followed was the standard legal wording and the signatures of witnesses. Liam Brodie and another man whose name I didn't recognize. Setting the will aside, I picked up the next envelope. It said simply to Adelaide. Inside was a letter written in Pearl's hand. My dear Adelaide, if you are reading this letter, it means I am no longer by your side, and you have found the key I hid in the clock. I know I should have told you the whole truth in my lifetime, but I lack the courage. For that, I apologize. The woman in the photograph is Eleanor Chester. We met when I was just starting my career in finance. She was 21. I was 27. It wasn't love, more like a brief romance that lasted only a few months. When Eleanor announced that she was pregnant, I was scared. My career was just beginning. I wasn't ready for family life. I offered her money for an abortion. Eleanor refused and said she could handle it on her own. She left town and I didn't see her for over a year. Then I got a letter with a picture of a little girl, my daughter Fiona. I started sending Eleanor money anonymously through a lawyer. She never asked for more, never threatened to tell me about the baby. She was a strong woman and she managed on her own. When I met you, Adelaide, Fiona was already 2 years old. I fell in love with you at first. Sight and knew I wanted to spend the rest of my life with you. But I was afraid that if I told you about Fiona, you'd turn your back on me. It was a cowardly act. And I realized now that I should have been honest from the beginning. I continued to support Fiona financially all these years through a trust fund that was managed by my lawyer. Eleanor died when Fiona was 18. Cancer quickly and ruthlessly. I met Fiona a few times after that, secretly on supposedly business trips. She grew up to be an amazing woman. Smart, kind, strong, like her mother. She is married and has 2 children. My grandchildren whom I have only seen in pictures. Fiona knows about me, knows I'm her father. But she never demanded recognition, never intruded into our lives. She understood that I had another family, you and Bentley. The official will, which is kept by my lawyer, was made 2 years ago when I was still hesitant to tell the truth. But a few months ago, I made a new will, the one you found here. I had planned to talk to you, to tell you everything, but my health began to fail me, and I kept putting off the hard conversation. Forgive me, Adelaide. Forgive the lies, the secrets, all these years of silence. Know that I loved you with all my heart, every day of our life together. In a separate envelope, you'll find all of Fiona's details, her address, phone number, photographs. I leave it up to you to decide whether or not to contact her. She knows you exist and will respect any choice you make with everlasting love. Pearl. I set the letter aside, feeling tears flow down my cheeks. So many years of secrets and lies. Pearl had a daughter, a grown woman with a family of her own. I had a stepdaughter I didn't even know existed. I picked up the 3rd envelope. In it were pictures Fiona at different ages, from a little girl to a grown woman. In the last picture, she was standing next to a man and 2 children, a boy about 10 years old and a girl about 7. Their resemblance was obvious. Same dark hair, same chin line, same eyes. Fiona was a copy of her mother, Eleanor, but I could see Pearl's features in her smile, in the tilt of her head. The envelope also contained a sheet with an address in Portland, Oregon, and a phone number. Fiona lived on the other side of the country, but not that far away. Only a few hours' flight away. I went back to the will and reread it again. A lot of things were becoming clear now. Bentley and Marilyn had somehow learned of Fiona's existence and the real will. Perhaps they had found some documents in Pearl's papers after his death, and they wanted to destroy the evidence to save Bentley a larger share of the inheritance. But how did they know a booth key in the watch? Perhaps Pearl had mentioned it in some document they found. Or maybe they just guessed there might be something important. In his favorite watch, I gathered all the documents back into the folder and teed it with ribbon. Then I returned the folder to the stash, closed it, and hung the painting back up. I needed time to think things through before making any decisions. I went down to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine, Feascan one of the day, which was unusual for me. But today's discoveries called for something stronger than tea. So Purcell had a daughter from the affair before we met. He'd supported her financially over the years, and even dated her in secret when she was grown. And he'd left her 30% of the stock in his company, considerably more than Bentley. I couldn't blame Pearl for thievery fact of Fiona's existence. It had happened before we met. But hiding something like that for 50 years, lying every day, pretending he had only one child, only one family. And Bentley obviously found out the truth and decided to hide it from me, so he wouldn't lose part of his inheritance. My own son chose to deceive me for money. I remembered the words of Pearl's letter. I leave it to you to decide whether or not to contact her. Fiona is a grown woman with a life of her own. Does she need contact with me? The widow of a father who never officially recognized her. And do I need it? I didn't know the answers to these questions. But I did know one thing. I couldn't let Bentley and Marilyn be tricked into getting something that didn't belong to them. Pearl's real will had to be honored, no matter how painful it was for all of us. Finishing my wine, I decided to call Doris. I needed a friend's advice. Before I took the next step. Doris, it's Adelaide. You won't believe what I've discovered. I told her everything about the stash, about the real will, about Fiona, about Pearl Slitter. Doris listened without interrupting, only occasionally sighing or exclaiming in surprise. What are you going to do now? She asked me when I had finished. I have to contact a lawyer, show him the real will. I think I have to find Fiona, tell her that I know the truth, and that I don't hold a grudge against her. And what about Bentley and Marilyn? I sighed. That was the hardest question of all. I didn't know. Part of me wants to confront them directly, accuse them of stealing and lying. But the other part is just tired of it all. Of the lies, of the secrets, of the betrayal. Give yourself time, Doris said softly. You've learned too much. In one day. Take a break, think it over, and then make your decisions. She was right. I was emotionally exhausted. The revelations of that day had turned my whole life upside down. Everything I knew and believed in. Thank you, Doris, I said. I'll call you tomorrow. After the conversation, I went up to the bedroom, took the watch out of its hiding place, and stared at it for a long time. That watch had kept Pearl's secret all these years. It was the link between past and present, between mystery and truth. I opened the back and pressed the bezel like Liam had shown. The stash was empty. I had the picture in the key now, but the watch itself was still the same. Accurate, reliable, keeping time that couldn't be taken back. As I fell asleep, I thought of Pearl, of Fiona, of Bentley, of a life full of secrets and understatements, and the truth, which as always was more complicated than I'd realized. I woke up next morning with a clear head and a firm decision. No more secrets, no more innuendo, no more manipulation. It wastes time to act. The first thing I did was call Gordon Prescott, the lawyer who had handled Pearl's cases for the past 20 years. He was surprised to hear from me. We hadn't spoken since the reading of formal will 3 years ago. Mrs. Whitmore, what can I do for you? His voice sounded wary. Perhaps he sensed something was wrong. Minus Mr. Prescott, I need to see you today. It's regarding my husband's will. The will has already been executed, Mrs. Whitmore. All assets have been distributed according to Mr. Whitmore's will. Not all of them, Mr. Prescott. I found a second will dated later than the one you read. There was a long pause. I'll be in the office until 6 o'clock, he said at last. You can come back any time you like. I made an appointment for 2 o'clock in the afternoon, then called Bentley. He picked up after the 5th ring, his voice sounding sleepy. Mum, is anything wrong? We need to talk, Bentley. You and Marilyn need to come. Over tonight. 7 o'clock tonight. But we have plans. Cancel them. I rarely spoke to my son in that tone of voice, and he must have sensed it was serious. The sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, casting soft patterns of gold and shadow across the tiled floor. I looked down at my hand's thin skin, veins like rivers, age spots scattered like fallen leaves. They betrayed my age more than my reflection ever could. 78. Still spry enough to cook, clean, even tend the garden on warm days. My name is Adelaide Whitmore. I've lived alone in this 2-story house in Johns Creek for over 3 decades. Years ago, I lost my husband, Pivel Whitmore. Pivel wasn't a celebrity, but in his field he was respected. A financial analyst with a rare talent, he could read market shifts like a weather report. Accurate, consistent, quietly brilliant. I poured myself a cup of Earl Grey, his favorite, and sat by the window. From here, I could see the garden, his garden. The jasmine bush he planted for our 20th anniversary was in bloom again. Tiny white. Stars nestled in deep green foliage. Bentley, my son, was supposed to visit today with Marilyn, his wife. My only child. 52 years old now. But sometimes I still saw the boy who scraped his knees and demanded a kiss to make it better. They didn't visit often. Once a month, maybe. Twice if something needed fixing or funding. I decided to make lasagna. His childhood favorite. I wasn't sure he even remembered when Pivel died. Something shifted. I didn't change. They did. Suddenly I wasn't just mom, I was a concern. A burden. The doorbell rang. Earlier than usual. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door. Mum! Bentley hugged me like we hadn't seen each other in a year. It had only been 3 weeks. He was trying too hard. Something was off. Hi, honey. I smiled, eyes moving past him to Marilyn. Perfect as ever. Designer suit. Immaculate hair. That subtle but expensive perfume that always reminded me of cold ambition. Adelaide, how nice to see you, she said, kissing my cheek. Likewise, my dear. Come in, eyed lasagna. Oh, Mom, you didn't have to. Bentley began, but I saw it. That flicker of excitement in his eyes. He always did love it. We moved into the kitchen. Marilyn offered to help, but I waved her off. My kitchen made her nervous, too small, too cluttered, too mine. How's the business, Marilyn? I asked as I laid the table. Wonderful, she chirped. We're catering Anderson Consulting's anniversary event. If all goes well, it could lead to a long-term contract. Marilyn runs a catering company. Started with hors d'oeuvres at friends' parties, now has 5 employees and an office downtown. I admire her drive. That's great, I said sincerely. You've always been ambitious. Yes, but we need to grow. She glanced at Bentley. We're looking at opening a second office in the northern suburbs. And you need investment? I asked, cutting through the fluff. Bentley blushed just like I used to. Pivel never did. Not really, Mother. Just sharing our plans. I nodded, placing the lasagna on the table. Dinner was pleasant on the surface. Bentley talked taxes and clients. Marilyn talked weddings and menu planning. I listened, but there was something missing. Too many generalities. Too few truths. Afterward, we moved to the living room. I served tea and apple pie. Marilyn declined diet. Of course. Bentley took seconds. Then it came. Mother, he began. We've been thinking. The house, it's a lot for you, all alone. Here we go. I like the space, I said. There are memories in every corner. Of course, Marilyn jumped in. But it must be exhausting at your age. My age. As though I were on death's doorstep. I manage fine. Mrs. Jenkins cleans once a week. I do the rest. That winter, remember? When you slipped. I stumbled, not slipped. That can happen to anyone. We're just worried, Marilyn said, voice laced with polished concern. There's a beautiful apartment at Sunny Acres, she continued. Medical care and meticulous in the care of his collection. But he always kept the most valuable ones, the Vashon constant, in a special case. I took them in my hands, feeling a pleasant heaviness. The engraved gold case, the flawless dial. Herval liked to say that a good watch had a soul. I opened the lid and looked at the movement, which had worked flawlessly so far. I wound it up and put it to my ear, listening to the ticking. The sound took me back to a time when Pearl had been alive, and we'd spent evenings together in this very house. I closed the watch and returned it to its case. Something in Bentley and Marilyn's behavior made me uneasy. I decided that tomorrow I would put the watch somewhere more secure. My intuition told me that the interest in Pearl's collection was not accidental, and I had better be on my guard. As I fell asleep in my big bed, I thought about how my life had changed over the past 3 years, about the loneliness that had become my constant companion, about the son who has turned into a polite stranger, about a house that holds so many memories that sometimes feels like a living thing. And somewhere deep inside, I felt that the peace I had so carefully built since Pearl's death was about to be broken. A few days after Bentley and Marilyn's visit, I still couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. Their interest in Pearl's watch seemed to me too insistent. I told Doris about it when we met for morning coffee on her veranda. It was a beautiful spring day and the sun was already warming, though I could still feel the morning chill. They never asked about the clock before. I stirred the coffee, watching the sugar crystals dissolve. Not a word in the 3 years since Pearl's death, and suddenly there was such interest. Doris pressed her lips together. She always did that when she was unhappy about something. And you say they mentioned Marilyn's business expansion? Yes, a second office somewhere up north. I sipped my coffee, but they didn't ask for money directly. Not yet. And this watch? Is it valuable? I nodded. Especially the Vashon Constantine. Pearl bought it at an auction in Geneva. He never said how much he paid, but I suspect it was quite a lot. He always kept them separate from the rest of his collection. And how often do Bentley and Marilyn visit you? Once a month usually, sometimes less often. Doris snorted. Not too often for an only son. I sighed. This was a conversation we'd had more than once. They have their own lives. Doris Bentley had always been independent. Independent? Doris raised an eyebrow. Didn't you tell me how he called? Every other day when he was married to his first wife, Lara. She was right. Before Marilyn, there was Laura, a sweet, quiet elementary school teacher. They divorced after 7 years of marriage. Incompatibility of character, Bentley explained. A year later, he met Marilyn. She was the complete opposite of Lara. Bright, ambitious, purposeful, and since then, Bentley has been coming to my house less and less often. Marilyn is very busy with her business. I tried to justify my sister-in-law, though I didn't really believe in what I was saying. And Bentley is too busy to visit his mother. Dora shook her head. You know, Adelaide, sometimes you can be too kind to people who don't deserve it. I didn't say anything. What could I say? That I couldn't bear the thought of my only son avoiding me. That I was afraid to admit that we were strangers to each other. Just be careful. Doris covered my hand with hers. And the clock? Maybe you should check to make sure it's okay. I looked at her in surprise. You don't think Bentley could have? I don't think anything. Dora shrugged. Just check it out. That evening I went up to the bedroom and opened the closet. Hidden behind a stack of linens was a small mahogany box inlaid with mother of pearl. I pulled it out and set it on the bed. The box wasn't locked. I'd lost the key long ago, but it didn't matter. No one but me knew it existed. Or at least that's what I thought. Inside were 5 pocket watches from different manufacturers. I carefully took each one out, checking their condition. All were in place except I froze. The case that should have held the Vacheron Constantin was empty. My heart skipped a beat. I turned the box over, shaking out the contents onto the bed. Maybe I just put them somewhere else. But I remembered exactly how I'd returned them to the case after the last time I'd checked. I started frantically searching all over the room. I opened every drawer, looked under the bed, checked the pockets of every coat in the closet. The watch was nowhere to be found. The thought I'd been chasing away from me became crystal clear. The watch had been stolen, and I knew exactly who had done it. Bentley and Marilyn. Who else would know about the box? Who else had been in me house? Lately? Only them. I sat on the edge of the bed, feeling my hands shake up my own son had stolen my late husband's watch from me. The watch that had meant so much to Pearl. The watch he'd kept with such care. My first impulse was to call Bentley and demand an explanation. But something stopped me. Intuition, perhaps, or a desire to understand what was going on before jumping to conclusions. I gathered the rest of the watch back into the box and put it back where it belonged. Then I went down to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of wine. Not a habit, more of an exception. But right now I needed to gather my thoughts. Why did they need that particular watch? Yes, it was the most valuable in the collection. But if they wanted money, why not ask for it directly? I'd help if I could. Bentley knew that. Or was it more than just the money? I remembered the last conversation I'd had with them. Marilyn had talked about expanding the business. Bentley had mentioned something about a new car. Maybe they really needed their funds and decided it was easier to steal the watch than to ask. But how did they know where I kept it? I never showed them the box. It was always hidden in the closet behind the laundry. And then it hit me. 2 weeks ago, Bentley and Marilyn arrived unannounced. I was in the garden when they showed up. Bentley said they were driving by and decided to stop by. I invited them into the house, and while I was making tea, Marilyn asked permission to use the bathroom. She had been away for quite a while, but I hadn't paid much attention to it. It was all becoming clear now. She must have been looking for the clock. She must have found it. Then on her last visit, they'd asked about the collection to make sure I hadn't noticed it was missing. And I, stupid me, hadn't even checked the box after they left. I finished my wine and set my glass on the table. What do I do now? Call the police? No, I couldn't do that to my own son despite his betrayal. Confront them directly. But what if they deny everything? I had no proof other than my suspicions. There was something else that troubled me. Pearl had always treated this watch with special care. He didn't just keep it separate from the rest of his collection. He never showed them to guests. Never mentioned them in conversations with other collectors. Only to me, he once told me that this watch was more than just a movement. There's something special about them, he said, but never explained exactly what he meant. I decided to call Doris. They stole the watch, I said as soon as she answered the phone. What? She sounded worried. Are you sure? Positive. The Vacheron Constantin is gone. I was just checking the box. Oh, Adelaide. Doris sigged. I'm so sorry. What are you going to do? I don't know, I answered. Honestly, calling the police seems too much. But it's a theft. I know it is, but it's my son, Doris, and I'm not even sure I can prove it was him. The box wasn't locked, and I lost the key a long time ago. Doris was silent for a while. Maybe we should call Bentley. Just ask him directly. I considered the idea, but I didn't like it. If Bentley really did steal the watch, he'd probably deny it, and that would only complicate things. No. I finally said, I want to understand what they're up to first. Why would they want this particular watch? It's valuable, isn't it? Yes, but it's more than that. Pearl treated it in a very special way. Never showed it to outsiders. Never even mentioned it to other collectors. Maybe there's something hidden in them, Doris suggested. Jewelry or something. I never thought of that. Could Pearl have hidden something in the watch? It seemed unlikely, but then again he had always been a man full of surprises. I don't know, I said, but I'm going to find out what they're up to. And how are you going to do that? I thought about it. I needed to come up with a plan. Something that would let me figure out what was going on, without drawing too much attention. For starters, I said, I'm going to try and find out where they might have sold the watch. There aren't many places in town where you can get a good price for an antique clock. Do you think they've already sold it? They might have. If they need money for Marilyn's business, they're not likely to keep the clock for long. So, what are you going to do? Call every antiquary store in town? Not all of them, I answered. I'll start with Liam Brodie. He's an old friend of Pearl, and the best antique watch expert in town. If Bentley wants a good price, he'll probably go to him. And if Liam buys the watch, can you prove it's yours? That was a good question. I didn't have the paperwork for the watch. Pearl always kept all the papers in his office, and I didn't know where. I don't know, I admitted. But first, I'd have to find out if they were there. Then I'll think about it. Be careful, Adelaide. Doris warned me. This is all a very unpleasant situation. After Doris and I talked, I sat in silence for a long time, thinking about my next steps. It had been a week since Bentley and Marilyn had visited, and in that time they hadn't called or visited me. This was unusual, even for them. Usually Bentley was at least formally interested in my affairs a couple times a month. Their silence only reinforced me suspicions. They were avoiding contact, afraid I discovered I was missing. Or perhaps they were waiting for things to settle down before showing up at my house again. I decided to give them a little more time, let them think I hadn't noticed. In the meantime, I would start my little investigation. The next day I called several antiquestors in town, posing as a collector looking for a Vacher and Constantine pocket watch. No one could offer me anything of the sort. I then called Liam Brodie, but his secretary said he was away and wouldn't be back until 3 days later. It was a setback, but I wasn't going to give up. I decided to visit Liam as soon as he got back. In the meantime, all I could do was wait and think. I often wondered what might have been hidden in the watch, if anything at all. Pearl never told me all the details of his work. He said, the less I knew, the better for me. There were many secrets in the financial world and not all of them were pleasant. Maybe the watch held some secret related to his career. Or was it something personal, something he wanted to hide even from me? The thought that Pearl might have had secrets from me gave me a strange feeling. We'd been together for almost 50 years. I thought I knew him like the back of my hand. But perhaps I was wrong. At night, I dreamed of Pearl. He was standing in his office, his back to me, hiding something in his desk drawer. When I asked what he was doing, he turned around with a smile and said, "Preparing a surprise, dear." But I saw something else in his eyes. Anxiety, guilt. I woke up with a sense of unease that didn't leave me all day. On the third day, after discovering he was missing, Bentley finally called. His voice sounded casual, as if nothing had happened. "Mum, how are you? I just wanted to see if everything was okay." "I'm fine. Thank you," I answered, trying to keep my voice normal. "And how are you and Marilyn?" "Fine. Marilyn has a big booking for a corporate reception. She's very busy. And I'm, the usual routine." We talked for a few more minutes about nothing. Weather, health, neighborhood news. Not a word about that clock. Not a hint about their last visit. By the way, Bentley said before saying goodbye, Marilyn and I are thinking of stopping by your place this weekend if you don't mind. Of course. I'd love to see you. I lied. After talking to Bentley, I felt even more determined. They were obviously up to something, and I was determined to find out what it was. I called Doris and told her about Bentley's call. They're coming this weekend, I said. And they're pretending like nothing happened. Maybe they want to see if you've noticed it's missing, Doris suggested. Maybe. Or maybe they have some other reason. What are you going to do? Pretend I don't know anything. Let them think their plan worked. And then I'm going to watch and wait for Liam to come back from his vacation. The next 2 days passed in anxious anticipation. I tried to occupy myself with the usual chores. Cleaning, reading, gardening, but my thoughts kept returning to the clock, to Bentley and Marilyn, to the secret that Pearl might be keeping. The evening before Bentley and Marilyn's visit, I checked the clock box again. It was the same. The Vacheron Constantine was missing. The other watches were in place. I closed the box and returned it to the closet behind the stack of linens. Tomorrow I would play the part of the unsuspecting mother, and then I would find out the truth. Whatever it took. Bentley and Marilyn never showed up that weekend. They called at the last minute to apologize some urgent work for Bentley, some sudden order for Marilyn. I wasn't surprised and was even relieved. Pretending everything was fine would have been hard. Monday morning began as usual. I got up at 7, had a cup of coffee on the veranda, and looked through the morning paper. Nothing unusual, nothing that foreshadowed events to come. The bell rang as I was finishing watering the flowers in the living room, the little violets that Pearl loved so much. I put down the watering can and walked to the phone, thinking it must be Doris. Adelaide Whitmore. Speaking. Madam Whitmore, this is Liam Brodie. His voice sounded tense, which was uncharacteristic of the always calm Liam. Liam, hello. It's good to hear from you. Are you back from your trip? Yeah, I got back last night, Mrs. Whitmore. Adelaide. He hesitated as if searching for words. You must see what was hidden inside that watch. I felt my heart skip a beat. What kind of watch are you talking about, Liam? Pearl's Vacheron Constantine. Your son and his wife brought it to me for appraisal a few days ago. They wanted to sell them. I sank slowly into my chair, so my suspicions were confirmed. Bentley and Marilyn had indeed stolen the watch and were trying to sell it. What did you tell them? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Told them I needed time to evaluate it properly, that I would contact them in a few days. But that's not the point, Adelaide. When I examined the mechanism, I discovered a secret compartment. A secret compartment. I was surprised. In